In today's episode, we are discussing suckers, and that is plant suckers. Are they good for your plants? Are they bad? What are they? How to take care of them? Should you cut them, not cut them? Well, what to look for, what not to look for? Those are some of the questions I'm going to be answering for you today. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys, let's talk about plant suckers. What is a sucker? Technically, a sucker is going to be any branch growing low to the ground or coming out of the ground, just like this one right here. This is an Australian finger lime. This is one of the ones that I sell here at the nursery. If you came to my nursery and I wasn't here and you look at this plant, you will look at it and you'll be like, that looks amazing, I need to buy it. It's cheap. I'm just gonna let it grow, get a discount, amazing. But there's one thing that you need to look for. You need to look for suckers. While this plant looks amazing, it's full of suckers. So how can you identify a sucker? Well, normally a sucker is going to be different than the original plant, especially for grafted plants. If you're not familiar about grafting, well, let me give you the quick rundown. Grafting is usually when you take a branch from a known variety, like this Australian finger lime, this one right here, that is an Australian finger lime. But this branch right here, original branch, it was most likely grown from seed. That is not an Australian finger lime. So what they do is they chop that in half, they get a branch from an Australian finger lime, and then they stick them together using a special grafting technique that will heal over time and then become one tree. But if you don't look for it, over time you are going to get suckers, because the original plant is still going to want to grow, and it will grow branches below the graft point. So where is the graft point in here? Let me show you. The graft point on this plant is actually all the way up here. Let me show you, see if you can see it. It's right there. That is the graft point. But all the other branches are suckers. So what will happen if I let these suckers grow? For one, these suckers right here will grow way faster than the actual grafted part of the tree. Second thing that's going to happen is the plant is going to behave as two different completely plants. So as the suckers grow, they're going to shade the grafted part of the tree, and then this part of the tree is going to become weaker because it's not going to get enough sunlight. And eventually the suckers are going to overtake the grafted part of the tree, and that will die off. If you don't watch it, you will lose your original tree that you purchased. And that is the main reason why you need to understand about suckers. All plants will have suckers at one point or another. Now, the time that you have to worry about them is especially when your trees are grafted. Like this sanguinelli orange that I have growing in the ground. I think I picked this one up from one of the big box stores. And this is a rootstock, C35 rootstock, that is not supposed to grow in my area, because apparently that rootstock is only good for California and in Arizona. That is a completely different topic, gardening myth topic that we're going to be discussing in the future. But anyways, so this plant right here, I've noticed recently that I have a sucker growing on the base of the tree right there. You see that branch right there? That branch is growing all the way out and sticking out the top of this tree. And that happened in the past 3 to 4 months. That is how fast suckers will grow. You can tell suckers, especially when your plants are older, by how fast they grow. Also, sometimes they're gonna have different types of leaves. But this sucker needs to go. Why does it need to go? Because that is a seedling. That will not give me the orange that I want. This is a sanguinelli orange right here. That is a sucker. That's gonna give me whatever. Because a lot of citrus are usually gonna get cross-pollinated, and they're gonna have variations in the fruits that they give out when they start fruiting, which takes a few years. The graft point for this plant is actually up here. Everything below this point right here is gonna be a sucker. Initially, I thought this branch right here was a sucker, but I waited until it flowered and it actually gave me sanguinelli fruits. So this is part of the grafted tree, but that one right there is definitely a sucker. So in this instance right here, you need to remove them because they take energy from the grafted part of the tree. And like I said earlier, when you have suckers, they will always overtake the grafted part of the tree simply because they are a lot stronger and they are the original tree. So how do you take care of suckers? Well, that is very easy. All you gotta do is just cut them off, like this right here. Done. That's it. That's all you gotta do. But the thing is that you gotta keep an eye for suckers, because if you don't, they will overtake your plants. The main problem that I see in my area is going to be citrus, especially people buying new houses. They move in, they don't know the history of that plant. They see the plant growing amazing, and guess what? Then they don't get fruits. So most likely they have suckers growing and they overtook the grafted part of the tree, and the original tree is gone. So this is why it's very important to take care of the suckers. Now, is this true for all trees? Well, it's personal preference, guys. Like, I have this loquat right here. This is a champagne loquat. I like the fruits, but I already have another champagne loquat in the ground. So I've noticed this year it has a sucker growing on the base, right over there. You see it? Now that sucker over there, I'm just gonna let it be. I'm gonna let it grow, and I'm gonna wait for it to actually get fruits and see if I like the fruits. So if I like the fruits, I'm just gonna have both trees. But the thing I'm gonna have to do in order to keep the tree happy and having two different varieties growing on the same trunk is I'm gonna have to prune. When you let suckers grow, even though they're growing from the same trunk, like I said earlier, they will behave as two different trees. If one gets more sun than the other, the one that gets less sun will grow a lot slower. So to prevent that issue in this case right here, I'm just gonna have to prune the sucker and make sure my original tree, which is big, gets enough sunlight. Other than that, if that is the case for you, you can just leave them there. It's fine. But you have to understand and know your tree. Now, let's say you have a fig like this one right here. A lot of the figs, all the figs that I sell here in my nursery, they're all grown from cuttings. I don't have any grafted ones simply because figs are very easy to grow from cuttings, so it's just not needed for me to graft them. But figs will have tons of suckers. They will grow close to the base, and since they are grown from cuttings, I don't have to worry about them, because every single branch that comes off that root system will give me the variety that I want. In this case right here, this is an Italian honey. So, and since it was grown from cutting, all the branches, even if they are suckers, they are the variety that I want. Now, if you want a single trunk and you want your plant to look like a tree, obviously at that point you need to prune them off. Now let's go back to this Australian finger lime right here. This Australian finger lime looks great. It looks like a bargain until you understand suckers. And this plant right here, it's actually mainly suckers. Let me go ahead and prune the suckers off and show you the plant, what the plant actually looks like without the suckers. That's it. That is the Australian finger lime without the suckers. But if I didn't tell you this and you didn't understand about suckers, you will let the suckers grow and they will easily kill this off right here, which is Australian finger lime. You will plant it in the ground, wait a year, wait 2 years, and then you will be wondering why your tree is not fruiting. It is not fruiting because the suckers overtook the grafted part of the tree. You did not notice because you did not understand the difference, and just like that, your tree is ruined. This is why understanding suckers is very important, especially if your trees are grafted. It's personal choice if you want to prune them off. If you have a citrus, I highly recommend you to prune them off. Now, if you want to let them grow and see what you get, I mean, you can try that, like I'm doing with my loquat tree, but for most instances out there, you need to prune them off. So let's say you have an older tree. You just bought your house, and you're supposed to get fruits and you're not getting any fruits. How can you identify a sucker at that point? Well, I can tell you, if your watering is right and your plant is getting enough sunlight and your plant should be fruiting by now, and you have waited for at least a year to 2 years and you're still not getting fruits, most likely the person before you did not take care of the suckers, and they actually overtook the grafted part of the tree, and that is exactly what you have growing, suckers. To me, it's very easy to identify suckers, especially even if I don't know the plant. And the way I do that is simply just by looking at the plant. If I see a branch growing faster than everything else and it just suddenly appeared, most likely it's a sucker. And that is how usually I notice my suckers. I don't go around and check all my plants. I have way too many of them. But usually I get to know my plants, and when I see sudden changes, like my loquat right here, I was just walking here one day and look at it now, and then look up. Do you see a difference? Yeah, you see that huge branch up there with bigger leaves, and it looks completely different than the plant? That literally happened within 6 months. So I noticed that, I immediately knew that was a sucker. But like I said earlier, I'm just gonna leave it there and see what happens. If I don't like it, I'll cut it off. No big deal. As long as you prune them off, you can have a sucker and a grafted tree growing on the same trunk. Now let's go ahead and talk about a different kind of suckers. Now let me see if I can find one. Yes, there's one right here. This right here is a cottonwood. That right there is a cottonwood tree. The original tree, it's all the way behind the fence. That's my neighbor's tree. That tree has suckers. So the suckers will grow out of any part of the root system. And as you can see, I water more often than my neighbor does. So the plant knows where the good stuff is. So it tries to grow new trees in my yard. But this tree is very invasive, especially if you have water, and I don't want it. But this is a sucker right here. A lot of plants will sucker up through its root system. As far out as the root system goes, you will get branches, saplings coming off the ground. If you want to keep them, you can go ahead and keep them. Another thing you can do, you can dig this up. It already has a root system, and you can put it in a container, and just like that, you have a new tree. But I don't want this tree, so I'm just gonna go ahead and dig it up, put it in a pot, and give it to somebody that needs a shade tree, because I don't like killing trees. But yes, this is just another kind of sucker. Now this sucker right here is the same as the cottonwood over there, because it's coming from its root system. That tree over there, it's not grafted, so this is gonna be the same type of tree. Like I said, there are many different kinds of suckers. You just gotta understand what kind you have and if you wanna keep it or not. Now, there are also vegetable suckers out there, like tomato suckers, that people recommend you to prune them off so that way you have a bigger yield. And the idea behind it is the same. By pruning the branches off, it will actually send the energy to the fruit, so your plant will fruit better. But anyways guys, and that's it. Suckers are very easy to identify. Even if you don't know the plant, if your plant suddenly starts growing crazy, you have only one branch that's looking different than everything else, it has different leaves, most likely it is a sucker. If you don't know the plant, cut it off. If you know the plant and you want to experiment, just go ahead and keep it, but keep in mind, you're gonna have to prune them to keep them maintained. If you like the video, don't forget to like it. As always, if you have any questions, comment below, and I will see you next time.